Okay, welcome all. Thank you for giving us your time on a Tuesday morning. My name's Brian Elaine and I am the Partnerships Manager here at Engineering New Zealand. And one of the reasons I am introducing this webinar is because we are delighted to announce Lighthouse as our first national partner with Engineering New Zealand. So it means that we will work closely with them to give all our members information that they need around finances, and also advice that Lighthouse will be able to give in EG and on many of our other types of channels. So we're working closely with James. James is the Wealth Director at Lighthouse. He has been in financial services for 10 years and a financial advisor for the past 7 years. Prior to establishing Lighthouse Wealth, James led a large team of financial advisors from Whangarei to Invercargill. One of the reasons that Engineering New Zealand was keen to partner with Lighthouse is that they are a big believer that finances are often made too tricky and too complicated. And James is fantastic about just bringing things back to basics, making it easy, and showing how we can all operate our finances better. So on that note, the first one that we are going to be looking at is getting back on track with your money after Christmas. So James will talk about structuring money, keeping it simple, and how to automate your finances. So welcome to all who are here. Welcome to you, James. I'll say this again at the end, but I just quickly want to say that after this webinar, everyone who's involved will have the option to book a one-to-one session with one of the financial advisors at Lighthouse at a 50% discount. So if you want to learn more and take it further and have that, then you are welcome to. So over to you, James. Welcome.
Great. Thank you for that, Bryony. And it's probably a good topic to start with, getting back on track after the holidays. I know I blinked and 2020 was in the review mirror. We kind of got to Christmas and had a good time over the break, and then you roll into summer and you blink, it's already March. So you might go, oh, talking about getting back on track after Christmas, but it's kind of just the roll on of the whole holiday season and enjoying the summer. So the purpose of today's session is to really first bring back to focus around, instead of maybe spending a little bit more money than you would usually do, or you've lost a little bit of structure around your money, kind of that long-term planning, whatever it might be, to help bring it back to the forefront. And I'll certainly give you some tips. We can help those who'd like some help at the end of today as well, in terms of a one-on-one session. But we've been running, the reason we jumped on and signed up for this kind of national partnership was we just had a ball last year. We ran a lot of webinars with the Engineering New Zealand team around buying your first home, growing your wealth, planning for retirement, and have a lot of Engineering New Zealand customers now as well. So today is really just about thinking, where are we now? Where do we want to go? And a nice, really simple way to get back on track. While I am talking today, I talk about money all day, every day. So I'm happy for you to ask questions as we go. See if you can throw me off, give me a curly one. We've got Mitch, who will be running the questions today, and it's also his birthday. So make sure to say happy birthday to Mitch when you write the question. So we'll jump straight into it. Ask us questions as we go. No silly questions, all of that good stuff. Firstly, Bryony touched on this, so I won't go into it in too much detail. Just a little bit about why should you listen to me. So Lighthouse has been around since 2014. We've got accountants, mortgage brokers, and financial advisors. We're based on High Street in the central city of Auckland, but we've got customers all over the country. It's quite interesting. Since middle of last year, I've ended up probably doing 90% of my client calls via Zoom. And our whole philosophy, as Bryony touched on, is keeping it really simple and making it easy. Like all the jargon out there around finances, it just makes it too hard and a little bit overwhelming sometimes. So if I say any jargon, call me out on it. I'll try my best not to. But a really nice, simple structure. And I promise you, if you invest some time up front in setting up a structure where you still get to enjoy yourself, still get to have some fun, but you know you're planning for the future, you should be able to invest a bit of time up front and then manage your money in about 10 minutes a week. Bryony touched on who I am, so I won't go back over that. I've been doing this for a long time, helped a lot of customers, done a lot of webinars, and got all the qualifications you could want. We can get technical on this call if you'd like, but I'd much more prefer keep it really simple, keep it high level, and a nice simple structure with enough time. So the agenda for today is broken down like this. I've got about probably half an hour of material that I'm going to talk you through today, but I would really love lots of questions as we go. So the idea is, we've got an hour together, about half of it will be me talking, and the other half will be you asking questions through the Q&A, and I'll answer them as we go. So the areas that we're going to talk about today is firstly going, all right, this webinar today is going about getting back on track. That would assume that in some way, maybe you're not on track of your finances like you would like to be. So acknowledging where you are now and what you could do better or what's holding you back is a really important first step. So we'll touch on that. Knowing your financial why. It's very easy when you think about long-term planning to get a little bit bored, to get a little bit off track. Breaking down, understanding what motivates you and why you want to achieve those long-term goals is really important. Otherwise, buying cars and shoes and going on holiday is too much fun. So you need to know that why. A really simple strategy to grow your wealth, some investing tips, and then what you need to do moving forward once you've got the plan to stay on track. So as I said, the first step is knowing where are you now? So maybe you were really good last year, but you got into November, the silly season, November, December, and got a little bit distracted. Nothing wrong with that. If that's the case, if that's as simple as it is, then it's just about going, well, what do I need to do to get back on track? Where am I falling over at the moment? Am I struggling with my budget? Do I just need to get my budget under control? How do I make that nice and easy? Do I need an investment strategy? What's one that I am confident in, I can understand, I can write on the back of an envelope? Maybe it's you and your partner right on the same page with your money. You need to think about your goals. There's a few things up in the air this year. Whatever it is, what's that obstacle that's stopping you from planning for the future? So first acknowledging where are you now and what's stopping you from getting where you want to go. Oh, I love this picture. So I sit down with a lot of clients and I'll talk to them about kind of the balance between current you and future you. And I like to explain it in a tug of war. So if you think about a tug of war, what are you trying to do? You're trying to pull over the other person so they end up with their face in the mud. If current you is having too much fun, if you're going away on holidays, if you're buying the new car, if you're going out for dinners, what's the end result going to be? You're going to be having one hell of a time. You're going to be really enjoying yourself, but future you is probably going to end up with their face in the mud, just like after a tug of war. They're going to look up and wonder what they could have done differently. And I promise you, it really comes down to not how much time you've got to go until your goals. So if you're 60 and you're worried and go, it's too late, you can do a lot in 5 years where you can still enjoy yourself now and plan for the future. If you've got, maybe if you're 50 and you've got 15 years until retirement, I can really help you achieve your goals and what's important to you. Or you can set up the structure yourself and obviously achieve those goals. If you can get there, start at 40, we're talking about intergenerational wealth, being able to help your kids, having peace of mind, just with a really simple structure. But you've got to make sure, first of all, thinking about if you're spending too much money now, you're going to end up with future you with your face in the mud. You got to find that balance. And the flip side, which maybe is not too many people, but if you're, maybe got a little bit of Scrooge McDuck in your DNA and you're not spending much money now and you're planning for the future, you got to have some fun along the way. Otherwise, that bus might have your name on it around the corner and you won't get to enjoy future you. So make sure you try and find that balance between current you and future you. And if you keep that kind of tug of war in mind and finding that balance, it'll result in you having more motivation and kind of thinking more about how your day-to-day spending plans out. So as I said, we don't want to end up face down in the mud. So if we've kind of looked and gone, well, this is where I am at the moment. Maybe these are the things I could be doing better. This is why I'm in the situation I'm in. I've got my head around the current me versus the future me and how to plan for the future. And then in addition to that, we're then starting to break down and going, as I mentioned right at the start, it can be quite hard to plan for the future if it's not that motivating. So finding your financial why is incredibly important. So let's break that down. What motivates you? What will keep you on track? An onion. I'm not going to flip this over to an episode of MasterChef and talk about how to hero the onion in a dish. I like to think about understanding your goals like an onion, and simply put, onions have layers. We have layers. We need to break it down and understand what's at our core, what motivates us, and what will keep us on track. Now, the tricky thing is, I can probably say for 90% what the top 5 goals are for most people, but some of them won't interest you. Some of them will. So it's understanding first what's important to you. Why are you going to, if we kind of fast forward to this time next year, how are we going to make sure that you're still on track, that you haven't fallen off the tracks and then jumping back on again? How are we going to keep you motivated? It's about breaking down that goal and understanding what's important to you. So for some people, it might be retiring early, maybe helping the kids, maybe with university costs, helping them buy their first home, creating options for yourself long-term. Maybe you want to start your own business. Maybe you want to start a different career, but you've got to have the financial stability to do that. Hey, and there's nothing wrong with enjoying the finer things in life. If you want to keep up kind of those holidays, maybe a new car, spending time with family overseas, whatever it might be, that's fine, but you've got to make sure you understand what motivates you. So the exercise I play when I'm breaking down the onion is going, well, what motivates me? And I'd like you to kind of go through this at the same time. So if you maybe start with these goals and think about which one relates to you the most, this would be a really good way to kind of work through it with me at the same time. I'm going to use the example of retiring early as a goal and how we rip away those layers of the onion to find the core motivation of what kind of encourages us to keep going. You might think, James, we're talking a lot about goals. I thought we were going to talk about budgeting or saving for the future. If you don't get this part right, I promise you won't be able to stay on track. So spending some time, especially if you're married or you have a partner, doing this exercise together is incredibly important, because you've got to make sure you're both on the same page and both motivated by the same things. So ask yourself why. So let's work through this together. So I want to retire early. Or why do I want to retire early? I want to retire early because I want to spend my days doing something else. Well, why do you want to spend your days doing something else? I want to spend my days doing something else because I don't enjoy my job. Okay, well, why? I don't enjoy my job because I would prefer to be spending the majority of my time outdoors. Maybe you want to be a hiking guide, or you want to spend time in the gardens, or you want to start a trade, whatever it might be. Well, the obvious question is, well, what's stopping you from doing that now? I can't do that now because I can't afford a pay cut. Very common is that people can't change careers because they've got used to a certain standing of living or they've got responsibilities. Well, why can't you afford a pay cut? I have a family to take care of and a mortgage to pay. So if we think about, and we've broken down the goal from I want to retire early, it's really broken down to, I love to spend my time outside because I'm not enjoying my job. I'm not getting satisfaction out of it, but I know I can't do that until I've got financial freedom or peace of mind, where I can either afford to take a pay cut, or I know that I've got my mortgage cleared off, or that I know I'll be able to keep my family in the lifestyle that they're accustomed to. So instead of that really high level goal, we've broken it all the way down and we know what's really motivating us. And if you break down your why and you understand what motivates you, that will allow you to make sure that future you is holding on to that rope just as tightly and starting to pull a little bit more in that direction. And current you will be okay giving future you a little bit of rope. So once we know what motivates us, it's then about going, you go, James, I understand why I'm in the position I'm in. I understand what motivates me. I really want to get this right. I really want to help grow my wealth, achieve my goals. Then going, well, what do I do? What do I need to do to help get on track? This is my structure. And Bryony touched on it right at the start around what I like to do for my customers, because I'm not going to, give you some play around on the edges and give you an extra 1% return on your portfolio. I just don't think that's where the energy should be invested. I believe setting up a structure, giving it enough time, which you don't have to focus all your energy on, and then you go and enjoy time with your busy jobs and with your kids and your hobbies and your friends and your family, whatever you enjoy doing. So these are the 3 key components to, I think, a really good strategy around growing your wealth. Number 1, keeping it really simple. Can you tell me in 30 seconds what your strategy is around growing your wealth? Can you write it on the back of an envelope? Is it very easy to understand? Number 2, is it sustainable? Think about all the people out there on the 1st of January who said, from the 1st of January, I'm going to start eating broccoli, chicken, and rice. I'm going to go to the gym twice a day. And by March, I can throw away the cheese grater because I'm going to have shredded abs. Just put the cheese on the abs, although you're probably not eating cheese. It's got to be sustainable. So you've got to make sure that you're having some fun now, so you can keep to it. So we're not trying to get back on track this time next year. So keeping it really simple, making sure it's sustainable, that we're having some fun along the way, that we're not trying to make 10 years of growth in 6 months, because it's just not going to happen. And finally, making it automated. Setting up a structure up front where you invest a bit of time, where your money kind of filters into the areas that it needs to go into, where you're not having to think about, should I do this, or how much should I invest, or I've got this bill coming up. That it's all automated, so it all kind of flows, it's got the structure, and you should be able to manage your money in 10 minutes a week with this way. So keeping it really simple, keeping it sustainable, keeping it automated. This structure will be challenged. You will hear people talking about, I've made all this money in Bitcoin. I've started this business. Uncle Bob at the barbecue will talk about how he's made all this money doing this crazy new thing. That's not going to be you. You're going to keep it a really simple strategy, simple, sustainable, and automated, and you're going to give it enough time, and it's going to grow, and you're going to look down the line and be like, wow, this is something pretty impressive. So if we're talking about, well, that's the structure that we're looking to achieve, the next question becomes, well, what's the key? What do I actually need to do? What are the basics behind it? Once again, not going to talk to you about right now investment property or index funds or playing around on the edges. I keep it to basics. And the reason I keep it to basics is the reason people look at all those other ways to grow their money is they don't want to do the hard work and sacrifice now to set up the right structure. I believe your biggest asset by far is your income. I've got customers that earn $1 million a year who are never going to be able to retire because they've got this lavish lifestyle. It's got people earning $40,000 a year washing cars. They've got enough money to retire right now. It's about going, how do I manage my money? Not how much I earn, but how much I save and I invest for the future. So the key and the champion is the budget. That's the trophy right there. It's how we manage our money. So I know we've got engineers on the line. I'm sure there is some fabulous Excel spreadsheet budgets out on this call at the moment, which is completely fine. It's really about whatever works for you. But if what you're doing right now isn't working for you, I would encourage you not to use the spreadsheet. I would encourage you to set up a simple structure where money gets filtered into different accounts. So what does that look like? This is the structure that I help my clients set up, and it's pretty foolproof. If you set it up the right way, it's hard to go wrong with it. So there's 5 different areas our money is going to go into. The first one is going into our responsibilities. So our mortgage, our rent, our fixed bills. So we're going to work out how much we spend on this per year, And then if you get paid a fortnight, you're going to divide that by 26 and filter that amount as an automatic payment straight into your mortgage, rent, fixed bills account. Now, the reason we're thinking about it per annum is I'm sure quite a few of you on the line go, I have rich paydays and I have poor paydays. I have paydays where like I pay my gym membership monthly, or my rates come due once a quarter, whatever it might be. We need to make sure that you've got consistency with your pay, so you've got a lot more structure. So for example, if your rates are $2,000 a year, we're going to divide that by 26, and a regular amount each fortnight is going to go away for your rates. Your emergency fund. An emergency fund is something that not a lot of Kiwis have, but you're about to have one soon, which is going to be awesome. We know that things go wrong in life, and you need to have a plan for when they go wrong. So it's not if, it's, it's just going to be when, just, as we know, how life works. So I recommend that you have a separate account where you're contributing not a huge amount, but a regular amount for when something goes wrong. And ideally, you should be looking to build that emergency fund to 3 to 6 months of expenses. We've then got your short-term savings. So sometimes people will save for the long term. They'll have their mortgage account. They might even have the emergency fund account. But without the short-term savings, you're human. You're going to want to go get some new clothes, maybe a new suit. You might want to go on a holiday. What happens if you don't have this account set up for those short-term goals, maybe a new car, is you end up dipping in from your emergency fund, which is not the purpose of an emergency fund. A holiday is not an emergency, though sometimes it might feel like it, and you don't want to have to draw back down on your mortgage. So the short-term savings account is a really important part of the strategy. And then long-term savings. If we're thinking about that, the tug of war between future you and current you, a lot of these are focused on the short term, although the mortgage helps you in the long term. You need to be putting a regular amount aside for your long-term savings. We're going to talk about some specifics around what are the long-term savings in the next slide. A really good example is KiwiSaver is an example of long-term savings, but it's not enough by itself. And then once we filter away to those 4 specific areas, there's going to be an amount of money left over. That's going to be your day-to-day account. That's going to cover your groceries, any one-off expenses during the week, going to the doctor, or a big dentist bill would probably be the emergency fund, going out for dinners, paying for the coffees. And it's really important you manage that day-to-day account well. And it might take a little while. You might run out of money a couple of days short, but we don't dip into the emergency fund. We don't dip into the short-term savings. Some of it will be around discipline and getting comfortable with it. The other part will also be making sure you're not being too hard on yourself. So don't try and save so much that you kind of end up not having any fun in the moment. You want to work out what's important to you and then be able to regularly contribute to it. But the key with the day-to-day account, and usually where most people go wrong with their day-to-day spending, is they're not spending money really on things that they enjoy. They're spending their money on the going to the grocery store 5 days a week, maybe going out for coffees, whatever it might be, instead of actually planning and going, I want to go out for this dinner because it's important to me. I'm going to do one grocery shop a week. Having a bit more structure around that day-to-day account. The way to set this up is, as I said, having the 5 different accounts, automatic payments, funneling them all through. Now, I don't think we've had any questions yet, but I'm sure a question that will get asked, which I'll tackle now, is going, well, how much should I pay into each of these accounts? So let me firstly say it really depends on your income and your responsibilities. It'll be different for everybody. A good general rule of thumb is the mortgage and the day-to-day expenses and account should be about 60%. So the top left and the center should be about 60% of your income. 20% should go towards short-term savings, 10% towards the emergency fund, and then 10% to the long-term savings. That's a good general rule of thumb. The problem you've got though is budgeting's like it's a huge tick, and not enough people get it right. But if you're able to manage your cash flow, then you've got to go, you shouldn't just pay off your mortgage over 20 or 30 years. You need to be thinking about, how am I going to start to grow my assets and build passive income, so one day I don't have to be dependent on my income. A salary is obviously important, but you're swapping your time for money, and you want to get to a point where your money never sleeps. If you've got property, it's going up in value, your KiwiSaver is going up in value, maybe you've got some other investments and it's all growing. So you can't just pay down your mortgage, you've got to grow your wealth at the same time. So in addition to your budget, I've got 4 tips to how to help grow your wealth. Tip number 1, annually increase your mortgage repayments. So what does that mean? It means that, if you get a pay rise, hopefully you will, what usually happens is everybody just gets more comfortable with a better standard of living. Instead of just increasing your standard of living, if we're thinking about the tug of war again, I'd like to split it 50-50. So say you get a $3,000 pay rise, $1,500 goes towards future you, so increasing the mortgage repayments, and $1,500 goes to current you, so you can increase the standard of living a bit. Well, we might have a question. Let's have a look. Let's see this question. One question is, once your emergency fund has hit what you want in it, like 6 months, should you keep putting money into it, or should you let it sit there? I think 6 months is fine. You don't really need, as we know, interest rates are really low. We don't want to have more money in an emergency fund than we need to. You're going to use that emergency fund at some point. So it's a really good question, because some might think to continue contributing to it forever. Once you end up using it, you want to top it back up, but it just gives you, having an emergency fund allows you to go, if life throws me something that I'm not planning for, I'm going to be all right. I'm going to be able to work it out. If I get made redundant, or we get a big expense, or something happens with kids, that will be okay. Great question. Let's keep them coming if we've got any more questions. So if tip number 1 is about managing the money effectively, managing the budget. Tip number 2, when you get a pay rise, make sure we're making active choices before you get too comfortable with that extra money, that you kind of split it off, 50 for you, 50 for future you. Second is making an active choice about your KiwiSaver. So it's about something like 50% of Kiwis haven't made an active choice about their KiwiSaver provider or fund. KiwiSaver in the long term will be one of your biggest assets. You need to make sure that you're picking the right provider. And the reason why it's important to pick a provider is because there's good providers and there's not so good providers. And if you're with a poor provider, your returns will be lower, and it'll mean that you'll have less money in retirement. You'll also want to pick a provider that aligns with your what's important to you. So maybe it's socially responsible investing. Maybe it's a good app, so you can see good reporting. Maybe it's a good call center or good advice, so you can get that support. In addition to the provider, you're also wanting to make sure that you pick the right fund. So should you be in high risk? Should you be in low risk? Should you be in medium risk? There's some really good tools to help you work those out. And of course, we help our customers with that as well. Index funds. So the first 2, pretty straightforward. Last 2, a little bit more complicated. An index fund is, if we're thinking about, as I said, at least 10% of your salary should be going towards long-term savings. How much are you contributing to KiwiSaver? 3%. 3% is not enough money. I would love to see you regularly contributing to, think of it at a high level, like an unlocked KiwiSaver. So an index fund is a basket of shares. There's lots of different ones, maybe 100 companies around the world, and that'll grow over time. It'll pay you dividends. And then the benefit of an index fund is you get the benefit of compounding interest over time. So that's kind of like in year 1, you make an interest on your money. Year 2, you make the interest on the interest, and then it keeps growing from there. The reason why I would encourage you to use an index fund and just not a KiwiSaver is because the index fund is unlocked. So if you put more money into your KiwiSaver, you can't access it until 65. Maybe you want to retire early. Maybe you want to use that money for another purpose. So an index fund is a really good idea where, maybe you contribute $100 a pay into one. And the last one is looking at an investment property. So this will obviously be dependent on your stage of life, but as a general rule of thumb, if your house value, if your mortgage is half of what the value of the house is, that means you've got quite a bit of what we call lazy equity in your home. So you might be able to use your home as security to buy an investment property without putting any cash forward. You just go, here's my asset, which I'll secure it by. I want to go and buy an investment property. Now, the benefit of an investment property is you're not putting any of your savings forward if you've got that security for the house. And then the expenses for the property, you've got somebody else paying the costs. So it's taking up none of your cash flow and none of your savings. You're just using the equity in your home. And the idea with investment property, especially if you're a beginner with investment property and you're starting to educate yourself, is you hold investment property for really long periods of time. So properties in the market a lot, in the news a lot at the moment. You don't want to hold property for like a year or two. You should be thinking about it in 10-year blocks, so 10, 20, 30 years. And if that property goes up on average, say 5% a year, over the long term, you'll make some serious capital gains. And that's how a lot of New Zealanders have grown their wealth. But in addition to that, that's why KiwiSaver and the index fund is really important, because you end up with a lot of your eggs in the property basket between your own home and investment property. So if I was to break that back down, 5 tips in total: managing your cash flow with the accounts that we just spoke about, increasing your mortgage repayments annually and making a conscious decision when you get a pay rise, making an active choice about your KiwiSaver provider and fund, looking at an index fund, and investing in an investment property. That's really if you want to get some high level kind of what the structure of a financial plan that I put together looks like without actually getting a financial plan, these are the main components of it. And then we project it all out, work out when somebody becomes financially free, really. Okay, moving forward. So if we're thinking about a game plan to get back on track, that's your game plan. The game plan is understanding where you are now, why you're in the situation you're in, understanding your why, so you're going to stay motivated over long periods of time, managing your budget, and then those other investment tips that I spoke to you about. So if you do all of those things and invest the structure up front, it should really all become quite automated. If you end up with the investment property, do yourself a favor, get a property manager, be the best money ever spent. You don't want to deal with tenants. Now, I'll do a quick disclaimer across all of this. Probably really important to talk about is that these things that I'm talking about is dependent on your individual situation. So maybe for some of you, or certainly for some of you, doing all of the things that I'm talking about won't be right for you. So it's important to take into your own personal circumstances and come and talk to us if you'd like advice. But once you've got that structure and know those kind of 4 or 5 things that you need to do, it's then about going, well, what do I do from there? There's 3 components going forward once you've got your plan to make sure that you stay on track. Component number 1 is execute. Paralysis by analysis, engineers in particular are very guilty of. Sometimes just too smart for your own good. You want to definitely weigh up the risks and benefits. Is this the right thing for me? But at some point, you've got to pull the trigger and implement the plan. Unfortunately, there's lots of people I've spoken to who haven't implemented the plans, and then the long-term impact is quite significant. So you can't just have the plan, you've also got to execute the plan. Number 2 is growing your wealth. So that might be pretty straightforward. I have the plan, I execute the plan. Then it's about being patient. We've got this great analogy that we like to use is thinking about your wealth like an apple tree. So you don't just plant a seed in the ground, expect apples tomorrow. You implement the time up front, make sure that you've got good soil, the right sun, you water it every day, and you wait and you wait. And maybe after the first year, there'll be a couple crappy little apples. They might be sour. And you go, that's all right. I know next year will be better. And if you stick to the plan, you make sure it gets the right water, and you're patient. You don't pull out the apple tree out of the ground to get impatient. You don't freak out when there's a storm, maybe like the market's being a little bit turbulent. You stick to the plan, and then over time, you'll have more apples than you know what to do with. And eventually you'll be able to help your kids and nourish them with the apples as well, if we're going to go that far with the analogy. So being patient once you've executed the strategy, growing your wealth, and being consistent. Patience and consistency with the structure is how you grow your wealth. And the last bit is a review. So we do annual reviews with all of our clients, not because the plan has changed in terms of the structure and the advice that I give. It's the people. So people's lives change. You have kids, you want to move cities, you change jobs, your priorities have changed, maybe your why has changed, and you've got to review and go, what do I need to do differently going forward to make sure that I'm on track? Execute, grow through consistency and patience, and then review annually. So they're kind of the main tips that I really wanted to run through today. We're about 10:40. So we'll see if you've got any questions now, please send them through. In terms of next steps, if obviously this is going to be recorded, there's a few ways we can help you going forward. So the first one is if you go, James, that's all great, but I'm just not great when it comes to money, or I need some help, or I need you to help work with my partner. That's what we do here. So if you'd like to have a game plan session and help kind of implement all of that specific to your situation, do some projections, work out when you can achieve your goals, etc., we'll send out a link so you can book a time afterwards. We usually charge $500 for a financial plan. Through Engineering New Zealand, we charge $250. If you think about the long-term implications of having financial freedom and achieving your goals, it's money well spent, in my very biased opinion. If you want to have a chat with a mortgage broker, we can also organize that. And the last one, which is pretty exciting, is we dropped the first episode of our podcast yesterday at Lighthouse. So Michael runs our mortgage business here. So we've got a podcast with the first episode that dropped yesterday around is now a good time to buy a house and Bitcoin. And our episode next week is going to be about how to talk to your partner about money. So that's also an option. If you don't want to plan, but you want to learn more, you can listen to us talking for 5 to 10 minutes a week. So hopefully that gives you kind of some, you can see through the lenses and look out to the future and go, if I do these simple things, that I'll be on track and I'll be okay. What I'll do is I'll pause and see what questions we have. I think I can see a couple coming through. So the first one we've got is, and then just write them if you've got a question as we go. Firstly said, thanks, James. No worries. When investing in index funds, should one focus on NZ only or go international? That's a great question. I'm obviously a believer in not having all of your eggs in one basket. So making sure that you've got as much diversification as you can. Fundamentally, New Zealand is a small island nation, which, China catches a cold, we catch a cold. So the New Zealand market's a great market to be in, but you also want to make sure you've got exposure to overseas and Australia, etc. So getting a good blend is a good idea. So yeah, diversification when it comes to those index funds. Another question, where would I find your podcast? We'll send you a link to it in the email that we send after today's session. So we'll send you a link at the end of this to book a one-on-one time if you'd like, to fill out a survey, let us know how you found this session, and also a link to the podcast as well. We're a little bit shy today. There's not a lot of questions coming through. I can see quite a few people on the call. We will maybe give it a minute and see if anything else if anything else pops up. Unless I see another question come through, I might wrap it up. I don't know, Bryony, if you wanted to wrap it up or you want me to wrap it up.
I can wrap it up. Can you hear me? Go ahead. Thank you. That was, as always, really helpful, simplistic, and I think a lot of food for thought. Just to think, where do we start? Because I think, as you say, like sometimes that's the biggest challenge is just sort of prioritizing, and as you say, I think whether it's working by yourself or working with a partner to go, what are the sort of key priorities, and how can we get there? So thank you for your time. Really excited about the podcast, and actually on two questions that my husband and I have been talking about quite a lot at the moment with Bitcoin, and is this the right time to be buying, a house given the market? So I look forward to hearing what you have to say on that. So as always, thank you for your time, and as you've said, it would be great if anyone wants to get in touch with you, and that great offer as an Engineering New Zealand member to get 50% off that advice. So thank you very much. You might have just had a question come through.
Yeah, there is.
I've summed up. Yeah. So I'll do back over to you.
Great. Okay. Thank you for that, Bryony. So one last question is, what is the most accessible way to get into an index fund? Another really good question. Sharesies. My goodness, Sharesies are spending a lot of money on marketing at the moment. There's people who don't know how to spell budget, but still have a Sharesies account. So they're doing a really good job. The only thing I'd say with some of those platforms like Sharesies, Hatch in particular, what other ones are there? There's a one that we all use called Kernel Wealth. They're the three kind of main ones in New Zealand. Off the top of my head, I feel like I'm forgetting one. Invest Now actually is another one. They're all fine. They all do the job. I personally like Kernel Wealth. They're a New Zealand-based company. You can just jump on their website, have a look. The one thing I'd say around the index investing is you will start with an index, you'll regularly invest amount, and then you kind of go, oh, this is going pretty well. And then you go, oh, what's this over here? Is this A2 Milk? Is this Fisher and Paykel Healthcare? And then people start investing directly into companies. Do not invest directly into companies. Stay at an index level, because chances are you'll be much better off just picking diversified funds instead of picking direct stocks. Because if you go on your gut, or if you don't have the experience, just stick at what you're good at. Go with an index. Is there still one more, Mitch, or are we all?
Is that bottom one there, James? What are good resources for learning more about index funds?
Yeah, I see that one too. What are some good resources? I know Sharesies puts out, they've got like a regular podcast. I would go directly to the providers, probably is the best way to go, opposed to any other specific resources. One last question is, oh, that disappeared. How would you reduce risk in a market crash, e.g., get unemployed and have no emergency fund? I'm just graduated, big debt, not a lot of money. So you shouldn't be, like, if you're early in your career and maybe you're saving for more shorter term, trying to build some financial stability, I would definitely prioritize the emergency fund. Hopefully you can do a little bit, even if it's like $20 a fortnight, into the longer term investing. But getting some financial stability behind you should be your priority. If the market crashes, the idea with the long-term investing is market crashes will happen every 5 years. I promise you, in the middle of the 2020s, there will be a COVID or a GFC or a 1987 stock crash, or, like, God forbid, a 9/11 type event. Something like that will happen. The markets will go down. People will panic. But that's not going to be you, because we've spoken and you know that you're investing for the long term, and ups and downs are just part of the ride. You got to think long term. So for any short term goals, make sure you're saving for the short term, make sure you've got that emergency fund, and the long term, it doesn't matter what's happening with the markets. Okay, we're all out of questions. We'll wrap up there 10 minutes early. How good when a webinar finishes on time. We'll send out those links. Hope you found today helpful. And I'm sure I'll talk to some of you in the future. Have a good one. Bye.